You're about to meet the innovators and influencers who are restoring the Judeo-Christian foundations of our culture right here on The Patrick Coffin Show.
And now, here's your host, Patrick Coffin.
Welcome back to the show. This is the third episode in a four-part series on pornography and its discontents. I am Patrick Coffin. Very few people have done more than my guest today to highlight the scientific and the social harms of pornography and do something about it. Clay Olson is an entrepreneur, a public speaker, a filmmaker, and the co-founder and CEO of FightTheNewDrug.org, an innovative problem-solving group whose mission is to raise awareness on the harmful effects of pornography through creative media. Clay, good to talk to you again.
Yeah, thanks for having me back, for sure.
Fight the new drug. Now, people who defend pornography or people who are new to strategies to counter its effects might wonder about the drug part, because you're not going to a drug dealer, you're not injecting yourself externally. In what sense is pornography a drug?
Well, we came up with that name mostly due to the fact that as we were researching kind of what the harms of pornography were, as we were kind of like diving into the literature and speaking with a lot of experts in the field, we started to realize that pornography had a lot of similarities as far as an individual's ability to kind of develop a compulsion and an addiction toward, continuing to use. And it mirrored a lot of the same processes that occurred with other drugs that we were already familiar with, that we know about, that we were taught when we were young about. And so it was kind of like, this is, we don't use it very literally, but at the same time, this is very similar to what we are experiencing in other areas. And it was just a catchy way to kind of put it into a different frame than we had previously done. So like when I was taught about the harms of pornography when I was a kid, which like I was taught very little about what pornography was and what it could do. But when it was always put into a certain kind of framework of morality and kind of put in the context of what was right and wrong, but it was never framed as like something that could develop into something that, like an actual addiction, a neurological addiction. And that was, when I discovered that in college, it was like, hey, we got to open people's mind to this.
So I guess the drug supply is between your ears, that you can actually engage that drug, the dopamine and the norepinephrine.
Oh, yeah.
Man, I'm not a neuroscientist, but I do play one on the internet. But you're releasing a biochemical, a dump of hormones, as it were, that as you say replicates the effects of something like heroin and cocaine. I mean, I've heard pornography addiction in its level of compulsivity compared to street grade crack. I don't know if that's true or not, but I've read a fair amount of the literature, and we're talking for some people an overwhelming, out of control life where they can no longer say no to this very harmful pleasure. I guess that's the definition of addiction. Do you have a working definition of what addiction is?
Well, it's the inability to kind of stop a behavior even when one desires to, right? It's the inability to kind of like refrain something that is causing you damage because of that internal kind of drive. And so, we get emails all the time at our organization telling us that they had a harder time quitting that, or pornography, than they have other kind of what we, societally totally accept and embrace as strong, hard addictions. And so that kind of led us to look at this, and you're right, very right. I know that you've had Bill Struthers on your show, and you've had other neuroscientists, and I've traveled the world, been to Berlin, and met with Dr. Simone Kuhn, who's done a lot of research on this, and it's very similar when somebody is using pornography as their drug of choice, they develop very similar patterns as others would to kind of continue to need more often, and a more hardcore version, even when they are kind of deciding that they want to move in another direction. So just to feel normal, individuals kind of end up escalating the amount of use and kind of what they are consuming as well.
Yeah, going from beneath the surface just to hit normal, just to go up to zero again, they would need it. Yeah. Now this is something, as social phenomena go, or as bad behavior goes, this has nothing to do with whether you're a conservative Republican or a left-wing Democrat. When someone like Noam Chomsky or who's the guitarist? Was it Metallica? Jim something.
The singer, the guitarist for Metallica,
Yeah. when people of all political viewpoints and multiple or no religious viewpoints at all are all saying the same thing about a harmful behavior, you're talking about a human reality and not something to do with religion or any moral prescriptions.
Absolutely. In fact, when we started this, I wanted to make sure that our organization didn't take this into that kind of same the same approach that I had kind of heard from for years, with kind of this morality, religious kind of dialogue around pornography. I didn't want to go there. I wanted to make sure that this was kind of considered a public health concern, because that's what we saw it as. And so as we started to go in this direction, frame it there using science and facts and personal accounts in our educational material, we were shocked and a happy shock with how many people were coming to the table saying, you know what, we're on board. We agree with this. People, very left-wing Democrat, very right-wing conservative. It doesn't matter where you're from. It doesn't matter what race you are. It doesn't matter what religious or belief system that you pertain to. This was, or even orientation, sexual orientation. We were, having everybody come to the table saying, we're recognizing these ills, we're recognizing these harms on a personal level, on a relational level, and on a societal level. And, we've got to do something about this. We've got to come together. And so that's what our movement's all about, is bringing people together, regardless of your belief system, regardless of your political standing, and saying, like, let's do something about this. And here's the education to help us do that. So
if someone has tried and failed 1,000 times to stop the porn and all the masturbatory behavior that surrounds it, and they can't, and they come to fightthenewdrug.org, how will you help them fight it? What's the first thing they need to do, or the first realization they have to make, or admission?
Well, a lot of people need to realize that oftentimes they can't do it alone. We have this idea that, like, it's pornography. It's not a big deal. And that, if I was dealing with, if I was an alcoholic, or if I was dealing with a heroin addiction, well, my goodness, I'd be like checking into a clinic. I'd be getting the help that I need, because of course I'm not capable of overcoming that. But with pornography, we kind of just think, well, first of all, there's a lot of shame surrounding me admitting that I have a struggle. And second of all, it's just porn. I can white knuckle this. I'll quit. I'm done. And then we come back to it and back to it and back to it. Again, the more we know about the neurological elements of this, the more we realize that we need help. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes, we need support. We need assistance. And so one of the first things is kind of the acknowledgement that this is something that you need a support team, as you would with any other thing that you're dealing with, any other compulsion or struggle. So we have tools in our within our organization that can help people become accountable, to get the help that they need. But whether it comes through a software or a program, or just on your own, getting somebody that supports you, that loves you, that can separate you from your behaviors, and fight those as a separate thing, and not judge you for those. That's going to be kind of a key factor in your success. No question.
I'm happy to be associated with Covenant Eyes. In fact, viewers and listeners, if you go to covenanteyes.com, to me it's the best. It's not just Blocker. The accountability piece is what I want to get to in a moment. But if you want 30-day free trial, my name, Patrick, will get you there. Access is so much at the heart of this phenomenon, it seems. If you have access through one click, one click of a mouse, everyone can relate to this little mouse device. Yeah. It used to be that you'd have to go and search for pornography. You'd have to go to a certain kind of store or a certain neighborhood. Now it's right there. It's anonymous. It's apparently free. But if you're serious about it, you don't really want to go to lowering your usage. You want to go to zero, right? I mean, that clean break thing is important. And as long as it's there and it has this anonymous feature to it, it's going to continue to draw you back to the same pool of dog's barf. Am I right about that? I'm sorry for that image too.
Yeah, that's a good image. The accessibility is off the charts. And no other generation in the history of the world has ever had to deal with this topic or issue to this intensity or scale. Mm-hmm. Like not even close. This is a completely different issue today than it was even 15 years ago. Yeah. And so a lot of parents kind of say, like, well, what's the big deal? It was around when I was a kid, and I'm fine. What's the big deal? And it's like, okay, first of all, there were harmful effects at its core since it's been around, but Today, we're talking about a completely different thing. And so, it's accessible to an unprecedented level. But you kind of you hit on this point that, like, is there a healthy amount of use? Like, okay, so let's say that I avoid this kind of material or that kind of more extreme content, and let's say I only watch it here and there. Will I become an addict? Well, first of all, I'd say great question. Like, addiction doesn't affect everybody in the same way. Like, compulsions are developed differently for different people, just as other types of addictions. People are more prone to certain things. So to say that everybody that looks at pornography is an addict is completely false and inaccurate. So if addiction were the only concern, if that were the only kind of thing at risk here, well, then we would have to adopt the mantra or the tagline as watch responsibly. That would have to be it, right? We'd say, like, you know what, don't do it, don't go crazy, don't do it if you're in these circumstances, but socially, as we would with drinking.
With driving, right?
Do it in these contexts and you'll be fine, and just don't go crazy. But that's not the only thing at risk here, and that's the important kind of differentiation here, is that addiction is going to affect some, for sure, and people are going to develop compulsivities and really kind of struggle in their life. But what about the casual user? What does that look like for them? And studies repeatedly are showing us how casual viewing of pornography can impact, on a profound level, one's ability to connect and love with another individual, their interest, their satisfaction with those relationships, and how they ultimately perceive kind of what love is and what healthy sexuality should be like. So it has a significant impact on any level on relationships and society. So it's not just addiction that we're discussing or concerned about. And I think once kind of you get the scope of the research and what the harms can be on this subject, you start to adopt a more of a mindset of, like, I'm not sure any level of use of pornography is healthy on a scientific level, regardless of morality and beliefs. Like, scientifically, it's kind of like a cigarette. Like, a single puff isn't going to give you lung cancer, but it's not healthy. And the more you do that, the more tolerance you build up for that kind of activity, and it's causing harm, no benefit.
Hence your tagline: "Love kills, porn kills love."
Yeah, porn kills love.
That's a hashtag.
Yeah, porn kills love, and it's kind of a campaign that we started a couple years back, and we kind of followed that up with porn kills love and fight for love. So our campaign is not just about what we're against. In fact, that's kind of a secondary piece to this. What we're really about is what we're fighting for. And Dan Milma was quoted in saying that the secret of change is to focus all of your energy not on fighting the old, but on building the new. And I love that quote because, here at Fight the New Drug, we are all about building the new, fighting for love, real connection, real intimacy. And it's not just this idea. It's like, oh, cute, it's a nice idea. I hope they succeed. We're, hundreds of thousands of young people, teens, young adults are gravitating to this movement to kind of say we can do better. We need to do better, not only for our own selves, but for the generations to come. And it's inspiring, to say the least.
According to your data, Clay, what's the early exposure average age to internet porn?
Yeah, so we are seeing, you've seen the stats, which are widely disseminated, that 11 years is the average age of exposure for individuals today.
I've read that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, our data is showing, and I think that's a fairly outdated stat. I think it's solid, and people still use it, and that's great. But our data is showing more closer to 9 is the average age of exposure, which makes sense. It's not a far stretch because today, today with the standards and accessibility of youth today, they are being exposed to pornography at younger and younger ages, and so this is something that should be, on a societal level, more and more concerning, and we should be doing something about it.
And even if you don't have covenant eyes, your middle schooler child is around other children who have access to a glowing glass screen device. And kids are kids, and some kids are cruel, and all kids are curious, especially about things that are foreign and exotic and different. So your child is in more than a good chance of being shown pornography in the playground, right? I mean, you can't control the zip code that your school is in. You can't control the kind of parents. And I've talked to so many parents, Clay. They have no idea. the tsunami of images that their children are exposed to week in and week out, and they just feel overwhelmed and helpless. So just talk about the influence of the invention and the rise of the smartphone movement. You can't go anywhere now without seeing an army of people. Doesn't matter if they're in the lineup for Space Mountain, as I just went to last weekend. You've got everyone atomized, hyper-individualized by this glowing device. How has that been a game changer?
Oh my goodness. It's not a question of if your child will be exposed to this, but when and to what degree. And that really is the new mindset that parents have to adopt. They must adopt. I could tell you story after story. In fact, I'll just give you one little quick story. I was contacted by, this is a personal one, I was contacted by my own sister who lives in Connecticut. And she called nearly in tears because her 9-year-old daughter had been viewing hardcore, not just images, not just magazine pages, but hardcore pornography every single night for the last, I think they said about 4.5 months. They thought that she was listening to music on their family iPod, iTouch. They thought that she was listening to music every night, but they came to find out and discovered that she wasn't, and she was extremely curious. And it started again in the playground or at school, and the curiosity, led her to search it. And then once she searched it, at first it was really shocking and disgusting and all that, but over time, she developed a kind of an interest for it and sought it out on a regular basis. So, and I could tell you, just that was a recent one. Just hundreds of stories of where parents are completely clueless as to what's going on today. I had a kid come up to me in college. He was a freshman in college, so just brand new into school, and he came up to me and he asked me whether I would consider Playboy pornography or not. And this is back before Playboy had actually transitioned from publishing nude images, but back when they were totally doing that, that was their core business model.
In addition to the literate articles, of course.
And he said, that's not porn, is it? And I'm like, interesting, because your parents, that is their definition of pornography. They don't even understand anything beyond that.
Yeah.
That is what. So parents and teens are using the same word to define two vastly different worlds, and I think that's at the heart of what's extremely concerning today, is that parents are just clueless.
I've interviewed Kristen Jensen on Good Pictures, Bad Pictures, a great resource for parents that I highly recommend. You can find out more. I'll put a link up at patrickcoffin.media. But what do you do after the horses have left the barn, like with your family member? Once that kind of toxic imprinting has happened, how do you fight that? You can't unring the bell.
No, you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube, right? It's happened, it's real, and so dealing with it, and I think the worst thing you could do is ignore it, pretend it didn't happen, or just kind of like, dismiss it. Definitely addressing it is important, and doing it with love. So coming at that with a lot of judgment and anger, which might kind of like fill your soul for a moment, kind of like, how could you? You know better. We taught you better. These kind of things. Which kind of might come into your head as to like a way to respond. Please don't. Responding with understanding and love. Look, teens today, it's not a question of if, but when, and they are naturally curious about sex, as they should be. Sex is a wonderful, beautiful thing in the right context, and so they need to, they need to know that you're on their side, and it's kind of like as soon as a parent can kind of open their mind to the realities of today, they can kind of like approach their teens differently, and then say, you know what, I get it. This is something that is naturally interesting, and let's talk about it. So first of all, you're not a bad person for being exposed to this or seeking it out. You're not a bad person, but let's talk about what you've been consuming and how that differs from more of a healthy direction. And I think ultimately what a parent needs to do over the course of their teenage years, in those many riddled conversations about this topic and sexuality in general, is help your teen distinguish between healthy and unhealthy. Help them kind of acknowledge that on their own, because the media pushes it all into one muddy bucket, and it's really hard to like separate the two. But if you, as the beacon, can kind of like, look at a billboard see a TV commercial, and instead of like pretending it wasn't there or didn't exist, like use it and say, hey, if they saw it, don't draw attention to it if they didn't see it, but if they saw it, say, hey, how do you think that's depicting women? Do you think that's a healthy way of expressing love and intimacy? And let them kind of like wade through that and kind of like decipher, and so when they graduate and move on to their own, they're in a far better place to handle kind of the world around them.
Well, that's a double-edged sword, because on the one hand, you don't want your children to be exposed to things like billboards and ads, but now they're at 6-year-old level at the grocery store. I mean, the covers of gossip magazines are like the covers of porn magazines that would, have the special section. Let's say Us or some People magazines, Cosmo, forget it. I mean, even the publisher of Cosmo admits, we sell softcore pornography.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about the power of, this is something I asked Matt Fradd, and he said something that I thought was really, really strong, and that is the power of apologizing to your child for failing to protect you. Like, I'm sorry that you saw this. I should have been more diligent, and I let you be a little bit of a lone ranger, and I take responsibility. When parents apologize to the children, it's a real paradigm shift. Hey, mom and dad make mistakes, and they're telling me to my face that they love me and they could have done better here, as they always ask me to do better. Has that issue come up as a kind of sub-theme in your travels?
I think that Matt is a good friend, and I think that he always has really sound and good advice. I think that apologizing to your teen or your child for kind of allowing for that can be an effective kind of approach. I will say that that parents need to realize, and teens, that no matter what you do, I don't care what kind of protections you put in place, what kind of softwares you implement, exposure will occur, and it's a reality of today. And so, short of moving into the mountains and becoming a hermit with your family and ridding yourself of all technology, these things are going to be a part of the world in which they live, and there is a danger in being too kind of protecting to where they live in a bubble where they literally don't have access to anything and whatever. And there is a danger as they become of age, and they're afforded a little bit more freedom with a vehicle and or whatever, and or even if it lasts all the way to the day that they leave for college, where there's kind of a Pandora's box approach,
right?
Where they've been so protected that they don't know how to navigate the real world. So I would say that that's why I'm a big fan of accountability software, and you want to talk about that. But accountability, like there's a time and place for filtration, for sure, and sometimes you need to bring that back at times that are more vulnerable. But accountability is wonderful because it lets them navigate the world that they live in, the real world, the world that has no filters. However, you're just kind of like you have an agreement where you're like, hey, we're watching each other's back, we're helping each other, because there are some real dangers and challenges out in the world. Because if I'm a big fan of of getting teens to where they can navigate the real world, not completely putting them in like a bomb shelter until they graduate. It's not realistic.
And teens are ever on the search for ways to escape the helicopter parent who's just hovering at all times. And then, there's so many different ways to bounce that ball, but one way to put it is to say that you may be setting up a layer of strong taboo and hence mystique and hence extra curiosity if you don't have some kind of, I would call it an inoculative exposure through a conversation about what it is, whether it's a billboard. I know in San Diego, there's a billboard campaign for a casino. I won't mention the name of it. And it got racier and racier until a group of parents wrote the CEO and said, we want a meeting with you. Our children have to look at this every day on our commute to school. And they did change it up. So the chances for opportunities for communication, I should say, are ever present. I've got just so much I want to ask you, Clay, and I want to compress our time together and make good use of it. Tell us about the Fighter app.
Yeah, we probably the number one question we get as we go to hundreds of schools and public schools and universities and youth groups around the country probably the number one question we get is, what can I do? Like, how can I help? And sometimes there's this idea that, like, they're just one person that can't do much. Other people have a lot of ambition to do a lot. So it was a very hard thing. Honestly, it was a hard thing to kind of work with, because the interest levels and skill sets and the geographic locations of all these interested people wanting to participate were just so wide that, like, actually harnessing their interest and their skill was very difficult to do on a volunteer level. Mm-hmm. And so oftentimes they would just kind of like slip through the cracks, and we wouldn't be able to kind of give them what they wanted to, because this movement is about fighters kind of going out and making a difference. So we released an app just a few months ago called the Fighter app, and the Fighter app is an incredible tool that allows us to kind of release campaigns, monthly or quarterly campaigns, and individuals can go in and they can sign up for a campaign, and they can participate in the ways that, like, make sense. We have a campaign running right now for Valentine's, and it's a great campaign where people can kind of go in and participate and spread the word, make a difference using in their own communities and their own social networks, and by doing so they earn points and they can win prizes and awards like longboards and a trip to Nepal and love sacks and glasses and all sorts of like cool merchandise that we have as well. So we partnered with a lot of different sponsors and corporations to kind of provide a lot of these incentives, and a lot of the teens and young adults, they're not doing it for the prizes, they're doing it to make a difference, but we've structured it to kind of make it fun and gamify it. So
is there a section in fightthenewdrug.org for spouses of, girlfriends, boyfriends of addicts?
They're not on Fight the New Drug. There isn't. Fight the New Drug focuses on a younger demographic of like a 17-year-old kid that's kind of like not sure what he feels about this subject. It's far more focused around the awareness element of it, the campaign aspect of it.
And self-mastery and the harms that come to yourself and all your relationships, not focusing so much on the spouse girlfriend thing is another ocean of conversation.
It is totally. Yeah. And we do talk with those individuals as we go out and speak. And a lot of the material that we have, the articles we release, blog posts, address those areas. But as far as like a complete section and resource for them, we don't have, but we do partner with groups that do that. Like, for instance, Bloom Recovery. bloomforwomen.com is a great program for individuals that are suffering from betrayal trauma or something of that nature. And we also have our own online program that's separate from Fight the New Drug called the Fortify program that individuals can sign up, females that are struggling, that they can sign up to get help as well. So resources for recovery and support are very important to us, but Fight the New Drug at its core is about awareness. So regardless if you've struggled or if you know somebody that struggled or you just think this is a social ill, this is a place to kind of get the resources and join a community of fighters.
So people listening right now who are counselors and high school teachers and school board supervisors and principals and church leaders, conference organizers, retreat leaders, they can have Fight the New Drug speakers come in and talk about it in the light of what we've just been discussing. Not simply, in fact, not at all really faith-based, but on that social, medical, science-based approach of the harms. You have a cadre of speakers?
Yeah, we have a variety of different speakers, and we go out and speak. And we speak to church groups and the public schools and all the above, and we bring the same message to each of the audiences. And we adapt it according to the age group that we're speaking with. So if we're speaking to 6th grade, 7th, 8th grade group, then we adapt the presentation to accommodate that need and on up, even to the point where we speak directly just to parents and give them tools and resources and how to address it, how to prevent it from occurring. And so our mission is to help educate as many people as we can. We do that through online efforts, but we do that face-to-face as well. We did over 250 presentations last year, and we intend to continue to grow that as our speaker bureau grows as well.
Great. Cool. FightTheNewDrug.org. Cool swag too, bruh.
Yeah, thanks.
That's very impressive. There are many moving testimonies there, and the production value content of the videos, it's just sky high, and it's just very impressive what you're doing. Real honor to talk to you again, Clay.
Yeah, you too. Thank you.
FightTheNewDrug.org. Go over to patrickcoffin.media on the show notes. I have links to the site and to the book by Gail Pointer and Kristen Jensen. Good pictures, bad pictures, and much else besides. This is the Patrick Coffin Show. Be a saint. What else is there?